The day was dying in a haze of orange dust and blood-red sun. The desert stretched wide and endless, broken only by the bones of old trees and the shimmer of distant heat. Caleb Dunn rode slow, his horse's hooves making hollow thuds on the hard earth. He wasn't in a hurry, he never was these days. A man with no one waiting for him rarely hurried anywhere. He was a tall man, built like the land itself, hard, sunburned, quiet. His face was carved in lines of loss and habit, and his hat shaded eyes that had seen too much. The colt on his hip wasn't for show, it was a part of him, like the scars under his shirt. He'd left town that morning after dropping off a wagon of supplies, but truth be told, he just didn't like staying around people. Folks always talked too much, asked too many questions about things he didn't want to remember. So he rode the long way home, through the empty country, where only the wind seemed to whisper. But then, the wind stopped. That's what caught his attention first. The quiet, the kind that pressed in on your chest. He reined in his horse, ears pricking up. A crow flew from a rock outcropping with a startled cry, and under that sound, faint, trembling, came something else. A voice. He tilted his head, listening. It was soft, broken, almost swallowed by the distance. But he knew what it was. A cry. He swung off his horse, boots sinking into the sand. He moved slow, careful, his eyes scanning the brush and rock ahead. His hand brushed the grip of his revolver, thumb easing back the strap without thinking. Old habits. The cry came again, clearer now, pleading. A girl's voice. He followed it through a narrow cut in the rock and came out onto a small flat clearing below a dry ridge. And there she was. A young girl knelt in the dirt beside a tired, sway-backed mule. Her clothes were torn, her hair tangled with burrs and sand. Two men stood over her. Drifters by the look of them, greasy hair, patched coats, the smell of whiskey and rot even from a distance. One held a short whip, the other had his hand wrapped around a revolver. The taller one sneered, giving the girl's arm a shove with his boot. "You think you can steal from us, huh? You got nerve, little thief." She flinched, crawling backward until her back hit a rock. Her face was young, barely 16, maybe younger, but her eyes had the hollow look of someone who'd seen too much. "Please," she whispered, voice trembling. "Don't beat me, I'm already hurt." Caleb stopped cold. He didn't even breathe. Those words, they weren't new to him. He'd heard them before, years ago, from another young girl, crying behind a barn while he'd been too late to stop it. His stomach clenched, and his pulse kicked hard in his throat. The taller man raised his arm again. "You'll talk when I say you can talk." Caleb's voice cut through the air like the crack of a rifle. "That's enough." The men spun around. The girl looked up, hope flickering in her face, though she didn't dare move. Caleb stood a few yards away, tall and still, one hand resting on the butt of his colt. The lowering sun burned behind him, turning his outline into shadow. The shorter man squinted. "Who the hell are you?" "Just someone who don't like seeing cowards work over a child," Caleb said evenly. The tall one barked a laugh. "You got a big mouth for one man." Caleb's eyes didn't blink. "You want to find out how big?" The whip dropped. The taller man's hand twitched toward his gun, but that was a mistake. Caleb's hand moved so fast it barely seemed real. A flash of steel, a single, sharp report, and the tall man staggered backward, shock frozen on his face before he fell into the dust. The second man fumbled for his weapon, cursing. Caleb fired again, one clean shot through the shoulder. The man screamed, stumbled, and ran, vanishing into the rocks, his blood marking the trail behind him. Silence fell hard. The smell of gunpowder lingered in the air, sharp and bitter. Caleb stood still for a long time, his heart pounding, eyes scanning the rocks for any sign of movement. When he was sure it was over, he holstered his revolver and turned to the girl. She hadn't moved. She sat where she'd fallen, staring at him as if unsure whether he was real. He walked closer, slow and careful, like approaching a wild animal that might bolt. "You hurt bad?" he asked quietly. She shook her head, though the gesture was weak. "Just tired. My ankle." He crouched beside her, the leather of his coat creaking softly. He could see the cut on her lip, the swelling on her cheek, the tremble in her hands. "You need water," he said, pulling his canteen free and offering it. She hesitated, eyes darting between him and the canteen. "It's clean," he said simply. "Go on." After a pause, she reached out with both hands and took it. The first swallow made her cough, but she didn't stop. She drank like someone who hadn't had a drop in days. When she handed it back, she whispered, "Thank you." Caleb nodded once. "Name's Caleb Dunn." She blinked at him. "Lila," she said after a moment. "Lila Gray." He looked past her, toward the ridge where the last man had fled. "You know them." Her mouth trembled. "They worked for a man near Dry Creek. Said I owed him money for the mule, for food, for breathing, I guess. I tried to run." Caleb's jaw tightened. "They catch you." She nodded. "They were gonna take me back." He stood up, glancing at the bodies on the ground. The dying sun painted them red and long, stretching across the dirt like ghosts. "Well," he said finally, his voice low and sure, "you ain't going back now." She stared at him, tears welling again. "But where do I go? I don't have anyone." Caleb didn't answer right away. He looked out over the desert, wide, cruel, endless, and something in him shifted. Maybe he didn't have anyone either. Maybe that was reason enough. He reached down a hand. "Come on, you'll ride with me tonight. There's a place not far from here where you can rest." Lila hesitated, looking up at him as if she didn't quite believe him. But then, slowly, she took his hand. Her fingers were small, cold, trembling. He helped her to her feet and steadied her when she stumbled. "Easy," he said. "We'll take it slow." She tried to smile through her exhaustion. "I'm sorry you had to." "Don't," he cut in softly. "Ain't your fault. Ain't mine either. Some things just happen, and somebody's gotta stop 'em." He guided her toward the horse, lifting her carefully into the saddle before climbing up behind her. As they started down the trail, the last light of the sun faded behind the rocks. The world turned blue and quiet again. But in Caleb's chest, something stirred, a feeling he hadn't known in years. Maybe it was purpose, maybe it was redemption, or maybe it was just a simple, fierce decision that no one else would cry those same words if he could help it. The desert night pressed close around the cabin, cool and deep, the air alive with the sound of crickets and the soft sigh of wind moving through sagebrush. Inside, a single lantern burned low on a wooden table, throwing long shadows that danced across the rough walls. The fire in the hearth was nearly gone, a bed of coals giving off just enough light to paint the room in amber and gold. Lila sat quietly on a wooden chair near the fire, her hands folded in her lap, watching the flames flicker. She was clean now, at least as clean as a girl could get with a tin basin and cold water. Her face was pale beneath the dirt that still clung to the edges of her hairline, and her ankle, wrapped in a strip of cloth Caleb had torn from an old shirt, was propped up on a stool. Caleb moved about the room with slow purpose. He poured her a cup of weak coffee and set it in front of her, then sat down across the table. The lines on his face looked deeper in the lamplight, the years etched there like scars in stone. "You should eat," he said quietly. She looked at the plate he'd placed before her, beans, hard bread, a slice of jerky. She nodded, picked up the bread, and tore at it with small, careful bites. "You live here alone?" she asked after a while. He nodded. "Closest town's 30 miles east. Suits me fine. Don't you get lonely?" He gave a small, humorless smile. "Not the kind of man folks like to visit." Lila hesitated. "You helped me. That makes you a good man." Caleb looked into his cup, the coffee trembling slightly in his rough hand. "Good men don't always do good things," he said. "And good things don't make a man good." The words puzzled her, but she didn't ask. She just nodded softly, the flicker of the fire catching in her tired eyes. For a time, they sat in silence. The wind brushed against the cabin walls, and an old hinge creaked somewhere near the door. It was peaceful, but beneath that peace was something else, something heavy. Lila broke the silence. "They said I owed them money. I never did. I just wanted to go home." "Where's home?" Caleb asked. She lowered her eyes. "Don't have one anymore. My ma died last winter. I was working at a trading post after that, but the man who ran it, he sold me off to them." Caleb's grip on his mug tightened until his knuckles whitened. He didn't speak, just stared into the fire. After a while, he said, "You were just a child. Ain't your burden to carry what men like that do." "I'm not a child," she said softly. "Not anymore." He looked up at her then. The way she said it, quiet, but sure, made something ache inside him. She wasn't wrong. The world had stripped her childhood away like bark from a tree, leaving her raw and scarred. "You don't have to be alone," he said finally. "There's a settlement west of here. Decent folks. They'd take you in." Her eyes flicked up. "And you?" He blinked, caught off guard. "What about me?" "You'd take me there. I'll see you safe, yeah." She nodded, but her gaze lingered on him. There was something in her look that made him uncomfortable, a quiet trust he didn't think he deserved. He stood, turning away to stoke the fire, pretending to busy himself. Behind him, her voice came again, softer. "When you saved me, you looked like you'd seen me before." Caleb froze. For a moment, the only sound was the crackle of burning wood. He stared into the flames, seeing faces that weren't there, his sister Mary, years younger, crying behind a barn door while he'd been too far away to stop the men who hurt her. "I had a sister," he said finally. "She was about your age. I didn't get there in time." Lila didn't speak, she just watched him, her small hands curling together on her lap. "She didn't make it," he said after a while. His voice was rough, stripped bare. "After that, well, I got real good at drawing this." He touched the gun at his hip. But it didn't fix a damn thing. Lila's throat tightened. She wanted to say something, but words felt too small for the hurt that sat heavy between them. After a moment, Caleb turned back toward her, forcing a thin smile. "You should rest. Long ride tomorrow." He fetched a blanket and spread it on the narrow cot by the wall. She limped over and lay down, her small frame almost swallowed by the wool. The room grew quiet again. For a long time, Caleb sat by the fire, staring into it as if it could tell him what came next. His thoughts ran in circles, memories, regrets, half-formed prayers. Then, sometime past midnight, Lila stirred. Her breath hitched, and she whimpered softly in her sleep. "Please, don't beat me, please, I didn't mean to." Caleb froze. The sound of her voice, those same words again, hit him like a bullet. He rose slowly, hands trembling, and walked to her bedside. Her face twisted in pain even as she slept, tears cutting clean paths down her cheeks. "Hey," he whispered, kneeling beside her. "You're safe now. Ain't no one gonna hurt you again." Her breathing steadied, her face relaxing as if his words had chased the nightmares back into the dark. He stayed there for a while, watching her sleep, the guilt and the peace warring in his chest. He hadn't saved Mary, but maybe saving this girl meant she hadn't died for nothing. Maybe, just maybe, the world still had a corner left where something right could happen. When the first light of dawn began to creep through the cracks in the wall, Caleb went outside. The desert was still, painted in soft gray and rose. The air was cold and clean. He stood there a long time, watching the horizon, listening to the sound of the waking world, the faint cry of a hawk, the rustle of wind through dry grass. For the first time in years, he didn't feel like running. When he finally stepped back inside, Lila was awake, sitting up on the cot. Her hair was tangled, her face pale but brighter somehow. She looked at him and smiled, small, tired, but real. "Morning," she said. He nodded. "Morning. Coffee's on." She glanced around, then at him. "You didn't sleep." He shrugged. "Didn't need to." She tilted her head. "You look different." He gave her a faint, puzzled grin. "How's that?" "Not so sad," she said simply. Something in his chest tightened, but it wasn't pain this time. He didn't answer, just handed her a tin cup of coffee and sat down across from her again. They ate in silence, but it wasn't an empty one. It was the kind of quiet that comes after storms, heavy with the weight of something unspoken but good. When they packed to leave, Caleb saddled his horse and helped her up carefully. As he swung into the saddle behind her, she looked back toward the small cabin one last time. "Thank you," she said softly. He adjusted the reins. "Ain't no need for that." But she shook her head. "No, there is." Caleb didn't reply. The horse started forward, hooves crunching on gravel, carrying them out toward the pale horizon. Behind them, the fire in the hearth went out, and the smoke drifted upward like a prayer.